Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee and Crimes with Maggie May. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you're back for another episode, welcome back. I'm so excited you all are here. I cannot wait to dive into this episode. I really can't. It is something that is for all of my conspiracy theorists out there, because we were right. We were definitely right. And that is very liberating for me to know that the amount of times that I have tried to talk about things like this and everybody's like, you're crazy, you're crazy, you're crazy, has come to light. And I'm not so crazy after all, which some of you might still think I'm a little crazy, and that's okay. But with that being said, I apologize for being so MIA the last few weeks. My app decided to malfunction and was not recording my episodes. And then I got busy with some personal stuff, and so I needed a couple days for that as well. So, but with that being said, let's just dive right in. So, as most of you know, my podcast has been basically covering the Epstein files. I've done one other case that doesn't tie to the Epstein files, and I will continue to do those cases now that I'm back up and going again. But a lot of it has just been Jeffrey Epstein and the files themselves, and the abuse and the trafficking, the cannibalism, things like that. But what I didn't realize was there is something underlying, and that is the plan that these people have to replace the already existing human species with a cloned version of who and what they think the people residing on Earth should be. Now, with that being said, this is basically been proven because, one, they have already mentioned several times that there are clones already among us, Selena Gomez, and that whole thing. I've covered that in previous episodes, so if you don't know what I'm talking about, go ahead and give those a listen and you'll understand a little bit more. The other one I wanted to talk about that kind of happened recently was Jim Carrey and how insulting that was, that they actually thought we would fall for that. That was insulting, in my opinion. A huge slap in the face to everyone. That the work on that clone was so poorly done that it was so obvious that was not Jim Carrey. And this coming from someone who has had work done, okay? Obviously, I have lip filler, I've had Botox, the whole nine. I've had work done. That ain't it. That ain't it. I can tell you that. And if anybody knows Jim Carrey, not personally, but just knows his work, knows who he is as a person, you know that, one, extensive work like that was not his thing. Two, he has said several times if he ever comes out of retirement, it's not him. And we know now. Now we know. And with the track record that Jim Carrey has when it comes to calling out the corruption in Hollywood, the entertainment industry, politics, the elite group, we all know that he had put a huge target on his back. And somehow, some way, something had happened and they got him. That's how I feel about it. And I think a lot of other people feel that way as well. Another one was our former president, Joe Biden, and how there is actually in the files an email that talks about Joe Biden being shot in 2019. And the president that we just previously had was not Joe Biden, which makes total sense because, one, earlobes, either you have connected earlobes or they're not connected. And that is a genetic thing. That's not, oh my gosh, my eye. That's a genetic thing. That doesn't come with age. Like your earlobes are not connected. And then when you hit senior citizen age, your earlobes just all of a sudden disconnect. The other thing being that man walked like a freaking robot, fell upstairs, which I'll be the first to say I have fallen up the stairs. I'm not a clone. I'm a human person. I'm just clumsy as shit. But Coincidences, one coincidence, fine. Several, nah. Yeah, you lost me. That's not going to work for me. So that makes a whole lot of sense. With that, they have also said that there are several other clones that we don't know are clones that are among us. And I think the more that we start to dive into, like I said, Hollywood, politics, that whole thing, we're starting to figure out who that is and who it isn't. Because in my opinion, after thinking about it and really looking at it, it's all kind of insulting that one, we fell for it, but two, they thought they could get away with it. Because now our eyes are open to the whole situation and we understand. And now we've caught on. And they're not as sly as they think they are. But anyways, with the files, and I found this very interesting, was that even before COVID-19 was COVID-19, they were talking about COVID-19 and the virus that they were going to put out throughout the world that was basically going to mass genocide several million people in order to test if they could get away with it. Basically, that was the first phase of them wiping out several million of the already existing human species to replace us with clones. And in the news, I've seen that there is a second strain of COVID-19 coming that is way more lethal than the first. Now, the first one, they had to make it look as discreet as possible. So they targeted compromised immune systems, babies, geriatrics, things like that, where your immune system isn't up to par. The other thing that they did was how many people had terrible reactions to the vaccine itself, me being one of them. Now, I am not a vaccine person at all. My kids are not vaccinated. I'm not vaccinated. My sisters, like nobody in my family vaccinates. Some of it being because health reasons. Big pharma is all about making money, and vaccines is the biggest way to line the pockets of big pharma. But the second being, they're not healthy. And the third being, for me and my family, my children, I have some Native American in me. And in my opinion, our ancestors lived thousands of years before us and didn't need vaccines. So why should I expose my children to something that has been roaming the earth for far less time than my ancestors were? That's just how I feel about it. I think it's corrupt. It's another form of corruption. It's another form of getting people to comply to the ideology that these people have, that they are somehow making the world safe, and it's not. It's a way to dictate the humankind, basically. That's how I see it. It's very corrupt. It's all money based, dictator based. It's all just corrupt, in my opinion. I think that they're, on top of the fact, very unhealthy. Now, with that being said, I did say I had gotten the COVID vaccine. I got the first dose. And that is because I worked in the healthcare field during COVID in Colorado. And for many of you who know Colorado, they are extremely liberal. And in order for me to keep my job, it was get the vaccine or get fired, which I now later realize was 100% against my constitutional rights. Story for another day. But the other being, if these vaccines work so well, why the hell do I have to get it? If you're vaccinated and I have COVID, you should be fine, right? Because the vaccines work so well. I mean, we popped out this vaccine within 6 months of COVID-19 being a thing, and now all of a sudden it's just going to save the world. Yeah, fucking right. But anyways, so I had gotten the vaccine, and when I tell you, I had the worst reaction to the COVID-19 first dose, that I did not even get the second dose because, one, my heart and my gut kept telling me, you made the wrong decision. I have gone through extensive detoxing to get as much of that nastiness out of my body as I could. But the second being, I was a sheep. I followed instead of standing up for myself and saying, look, no, fire me. But where I was at was I was extremely reliant on that paycheck and wanted to further myself in the medical field. And so I complied to their demands, which hindsight pisses me off royally. But when I tell you I had the worst reaction, I experienced paralysis for 3 days. I was dating a guy at the time and living at his place. He had a ranch and whatever. And I passed out in the corral while helping his mom. Just like blacked out, passed out. Couldn't move, couldn't walk. Everything in my body ached. It was paralysis 100%. I absolutely think that I experienced paralysis. And to get me to the bathroom, he had to come in, pick me up, carry me, take me to the bathroom, and take me back to bed. That's how bad it was. It was terrible. So anybody who ever asked me, it's bullshit. It's complete bullshit. And the side effects are not like the usual, oh, you might have a sore throat, coughing, sneezing. At the end of every side effect list to any medication, any vaccine, anything, it's death. There's paralysis, there's death, there's all of these different things that can happen, and I experienced all of it, and I swear, I'm pretty sure I looked death in the face. I thought I was dying. But anyways, that was their test to see who would comply to their demands and who would stand up for themselves and use their constitution to say, no, I'm not doing this shit. It's bull. And that was the first test. The second test was to, of course, weed out a bunch of the weaker people in society and make it look as nonchalant as possible. That was the first wave, in my opinion. Now, if you've ever, the way that I explain it to several people that I've talked to in person about this is, if anybody's seen the movie The Fifth Wave, it's kind of like that, in my opinion. And another thing that I want us to realize is that for so long, everything that's been going on in the files has been broadcasted on TV at some point, whether a movie, whether a show, something. It has been completely thrown in our faces for several years. And I think that, in my opinion, the fifth wave is one of the ways. Is it natural disasters in the fifth wave? Yes. In my opinion, we're experiencing the fifth wave, but it's not natural disasters. It's people with too much power, too much money, and a huge ass head thinking, look, we run this shit. Middle class, lower class, working class, they all suck. We want them out. They're dirty. But what they don't realize is we freaking built this shit. So without us, you would have nothing. That's just how I feel about it. But that was their way of weeding out a bunch of people. Now, we also know that there have been several times where people have been recorded that they had died from COVID-19, and then they walk in for like their yearly checkup and they're like, well, we have it listed that you died of COVID-19. And this happened in Montana with one of my mom's friends or my grandparents' friends. I can't quite remember. But they had it listed that she had passed away from COVID-19. And she walked in for like her checkup for like Medicare or something, because they have to do like yearly checkups or like life insurance or something. And she had walked in and they were like, well, we have it here on our records that you are deceased. And she's like, well, obviously I'm not. I'm standing right here. And she was like, how does it say that I died? And they said COVID-19. So there's also been like the falsifying records of that whole thing, which is insane to me. But in the news over the past several weeks, I have been seeing where they are talking about a second strain of COVID-19 coming that is far lethal than the first. Now, if you don't understand what different strains of a virus is, the best way that I can explain it is think about it as if it was AIDS, because that's something that's a little more publicly talked about. And the knowledge on AIDS is a little bit more extensive than COVID-19 because COVID is so new. There are different strains of AIDS. There's one called the killer strain, and that's like the highest strain, the most lethal strain that like from the point of diagnosis to the point of your death is like weeks. You just completely fade so quickly that your body is just like, shuts down. It just, like, there's absolutely no way. Antiviral medication does not help. There's just no helping you. You deteriorate in weeks. And that's the best way that I can explain it, is because every virus has different strains. They have then created different strains for COVID-19. So this next strain is going to be far more lethal, targeting healthy everyday. I mean, you can go out and work out and be as healthy as can be. You can eat your veggies, be whatever, water, and you still have basically no chance. And that is another way to weed out several million people off of the face of the earth so that they can replace us. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this was because Bill Gates, yes, Bill Gates, had a lot to do with COVID-19. A lot to do with COVID-19. And the coming of COVID-19, the experiments with COVID-19, the actual making of COVID-19, he played a huge part in it as well, which is crazy. And the best way that I can explain that whole situation is that somehow, some way, because Bill Gates has billions in the bank account, he somehow has got it in his head that he can fund all of this shit and become the dictator. Now, when I talk dictator, I'm not talking like this no kings, Trump's a dictator, whatever. I'm talking Hitler, because here's the thing that I want us to realize. Hitler did the same exact thing during World War II in Nazi Germany that Epstein and Bill Gates are doing now. It's all genetic engineering to create the perfect human that is going to comply to their dictatorship. That's what this is. If anybody knows anything, and several people think that World War II and the Holocaust was a bunch of bullshit. I don't know how you think that when there's actual evidence. And mind you, I just want to say that I think a lot of the stuff in history books and the way that it is so toned down when it comes to World War II is because of who owned, because he's deceased now, who owned all of our textbooks in school. Robert Maxwell. I've talked about that in previous podcasts as well. But that's basically what this is. It's all a way to genetically engineer their perfect human to replace the already existing one who has a mind of their own, has their own morals, their own values, their own belief system. They want to wipe out basically everyone and replace us with these conforming people who will then follow their dictatorship. Now, what I want to tie into, and I heard this on a podcast, and I can't remember what the podcast is, and I'll find it, but it's Dan Duvall. And I have never heard of him before until I had heard this podcast. And the way that he explains this, I am going to quote him on this and then kind of add my own spin to it, because the way that he explained it made total sense to me. And then after looking up my own research, I was like, holy shit, you were right. This is like, you're a fucking genius. He's very smart. He's very smart. Very smart. But he was talking about in World War II in Nazi Germany, there was a man who was what was he? Oh, crap. Now I got to figure it out, because anyways, he was a physician, and he had a doctorate. He had several doctorates. He was a physician. He studied like anthropology, things like that, but he was also an officer. I don't know why I had the biggest brain fart ever of my life. He was also an officer for Hitler in Auschwitz, okay? And the way that this ties into it is crazy, because like I said, there's a tie between Jeffrey Epstein and Hitler, and I'm going to show you what the tie is right here. So this officer's name was Joseph Mengele. Now, before World War II, he was going to school. He was a physician. He had doctorates. He studied anthropology, all of the things. Then, of course, World War II happened. He became an officer and was an officer at Auschwitz. Now, with that, he was genetically testing and genetically altering several prisoners that were in Auschwitz at the time. In fact, his name was Angel of Death in Auschwitz. He had a heyday testing all of these prisoners in Auschwitz. And that to me alone is crazy, because we knew that there were horrendous and horrific things happening in the Holocaust, but now we see the huge tie to it. And now here comes the even crazier part. So after World War II had ended, he then became a researcher, and he did extensive research on genetic testing, genetic engineering, genetic modification, things like that people who still today, he wrote books, he did all sorts of stuff, and people who study genetic testing, engineering, modification today study this man's books. They study Joseph Mengele's books that he wrote after being an officer and having the name the Angel of Death in the Holocaust. That's who they study, is this man right here. And several of this man's books were found on the ranch in New Mexico at Jeffrey Epstein's house. There's the tie between Hitler and Jeffrey Epstein. That's the tie, is he was studying Joseph Mengele's research for genetic testing, engineering, modification, and basically mimicking it. He was basically doing exactly word for word what Mengele had done decades before, which is the most insane thing to me. The other tie that this Mengele man had with Jeffrey Epstein is Kabbalah. And I am going to touch base on that a little bit more in another episode. I just want to show the severity of how much these people are all connected. All of the evil, all of the nasty, all of the dirty is connected from decades before. They all have passed down from generation to generation. And with Kabbalah, one thing I do want to talk about with Kabbalah is they have a huge influence and a huge, they're wildly into the Illuminati, which we've heard before. The Rothschilds and all of that bullshit and all of the evil that comes from them and their involvement in the Illuminati and Kabbalah. Jeffrey Epstein has said several times, I represent the Rothschilds, right? His ties to the Rothschilds, which the Rothschild family dates back hundreds of years. The amount of evil and demonic shit that the Rothschilds have done, it all ties into everything. It's all just a huge trickling effect of how we got from here to here. And it all ties together. And the way that it ties together is just the most insane thing to me. Like the fact that still in 2026, and before that, obviously, because the files are from like the late 80s, 90s to not even the 80s, more the 90s to 2019, when Jeffrey Epstein supposedly was killed. And even now, we still have ties to World War II and Nazi Germany and the absolute hellacious things that happened during World War II. That's just how it is. Like it's a trickling effect that will never go away. It'll never go away. And I think that with all of that, and then you think about And I know, like, it's pretty easy to look up if you just, like, I have found a lot of my research through jmail.world. I find that site to be way more informative and way more organized than the DOJ and the Epstein library that they have there. I think it's way more organized. If you look up designer babies, there are several emails between Jeffrey Epstein and Brian Bishop and Bill Gates talking about designer babies. And this is where it comes from. Now, on the ranch in New Mexico that they are now investigating, they are now digging things up, they are going through it, they have search warrants, the whole thing. They have found several medical equipment that ties to and would be used for embryo implantation. For anybody that doesn't know what an embryo is, it's basically, so you have the mom's eggs, the dad's sperm, put it together, you create an embryo, you implant it, and that woman is then a surrogate or the mother of that child, whatever it is. Sometimes people can't get pregnant naturally, and so they go for IVF and things like that and have an embryo implanted into their uterus and hope that it sticks. That's an alternative for infertility. But that's what they were doing here. And in the files, it talks about Jeffrey Epstein wanting to have at least 20 women pregnant at a time with these designer babies. And that these are designer babies are already walking among us as well. There's women pregnant with them. And the one thing that I want to talk about with this that ties it in, that is just the most excruciating thing in my opinion, and I think I've covered it in previous episodes, I can't quite remember, was there was a journal entry from a 12-year-old girl. Now, I think about me at 12 years old, I'm not even 1,000% sure I had started menstruating at that time. But however, there are drugs that can basically jumpstart your menstruation, basically. That's basically what it is in layman's terms, is it basically just jump starts your cycle, which I would assume they used quite frequently because a lot of the women, I can't even call them women because they weren't women. A lot of the girls that were pregnant with these designer babies were ranges from like 11 to 15, 16. Like they weren't even adults. But anyways, there is a journal entry in the files, and it's from a 12-year-old little girl who talks about giving birth. And she had absolutely no idea she was giving birth. She had been artificially inseminated with an embryo, a designer baby, had no idea what was going on. She talks about in her journal entry that she started having tummy pains and felt like she had a tummy ache. A tummy ache, not a stomach ache, a tummy ache. She called it a fucking tummy ache. And how all of a sudden she just felt all of this pain. And then she looked down and she saw a little baby hand and a foot and the top of the baby's head. And then Ghislaine Maxwell walked in, took the baby, and she never saw the baby again. And then it was like Ghislaine Maxwell had like gone MIA. And they hadn't seen her for several weeks. And then she would come back here and there, but she was gone quite a bit. The other thing that I wanted to talk about with this same little girl was they had implanted another embryo in her and she ended up having a miscarriage, and she had gone to the bathroom. The baby had fallen out and she had absolutely no idea what the hell it was, and she flushed it down the toilet because she didn't know. But she talks about how she went through all of this pain. She saw the baby's hand, the baby's foot, the top of the baby's head, and then never saw her baby again, and just wondered, like, why me? Why? What is going on? Why are we doing this? But it talks about the designer babies and how at the ranch, they implanted these embryos into these young women, these young girls, and that was how the designer baby process started. Now, when it first got started, before even the embryo implantation happened, it talks about Brian Bishop and Jeffrey Epstein. There's an email thread between them talking about how Jeffrey Epstein was the first investor in the designer baby system and how he wanted to stay anonymous because, things like this, it's not like people like us, we don't understand this kind of conversation. We just wouldn't understand. No shit. You're creating embryos and artificially inseminating these 12-year-old, 13, 11-year-old children to create these babies for you so that you can replace the already existing human species. And you wondered why we wouldn't fucking understand. Gee, wonder why. Yeah, because we're the fucking weird ones, right? Which is crazy to me. But Jeffrey Epstein was the first investor and an anonymous investor into the Designer Baby series, situation, whatever you want to call it, because it was his plan. Now, Brian Bishop, I haven't done a whole lot of research on him. I had to just kind of give myself a minute after listening to or after reading all of this because it just is so insane to me. But so I have here an email that it talks about the Designer Babies, of course, and kind of the plan, the funding, the who's going to invest in it, that sort of thing. Just like as far as like who they're going to inseminate, that sort of thing, like what the benefactors would be. And the way that they said that we wouldn't understand it, and I have right here the email and I'm going to read it for you, was because like I said, Jeffrey Epstein was listed as the first investor, and he, like I said, he wanted to stay anonymous because they wanted to keep the whole process anonymous. The parents, the children, the investors, everybody wanted to stay anonymous because it would brand the child a freak for life, basically, is what they said. Which it fucking would be. I mean, seriously. And yeah, do we know who it is and who it's not? No. But it really would brand that child as a freak for life. It would. It would be so detrimental for that child. That child didn't ask for the shit. And I just want to preface that by saying, these children did not fucking ask for this. These men used this power, this entitlement that they think they have, to create some fucking Frankenstein bullshit. And then they wanted to hide it from us because we're the fucking weird ones. Well, okay, Frankenstein, put the fucking scissors down for 5 seconds, go to fucking therapy, and figure your shit out. Bunch of fucking freaks. But then there was a meeting that was set, and it was to take place on August 2nd of 2018 at 4 p.m. On August 30th, 2018, so a couple weeks after the meeting took place, Epstein then emailed Brian and said, and this is what it says, and we all know that the typos and everything is all a code. I like implant embryo, wait 9 months, C24, great ending. That's what the email says. So we know that embryos were implanted. And the thing that I think we all need to remember with Jeffrey Epstein was, like I said before, all of this shit, as far as like the abuse, the trafficking, is all very important and all plays a huge role into the actual larger picture that was taking place, but it was all a diversionary tactic to keep our heads on what we thought was as bad as it could get. What we thought was as worse as it was going to be, that it couldn't get any more horrendous than that, and keep our focus off of the designer babies, the clones, COVID-19, that whole situation. And on top of that, I want to briefly talk about this for a second, because it's also another diversionary tactic, because once you start to put these together, you can understand like what's actually being talked about in the files themselves. And that's what they don't want, is the more knowledge we have, the more power we have. And they don't want us to have knowledge. I don't give a shit what administration is in office. I don't care. It is all a power ploy at some point. And I believe that wholeheartedly. Now, a couple weeks ago, Barack Obama had gone on an interview and had talked about there being proof in the White House that extraterrestrial life was, in fact, real. And I've always kind of thought that. I've always kind of thought that aliens were real, just deep down. I think that there's a lot of conspiracy about it and a lot of contradicting conversations about it, but I do think that for the most part, there is extraterrestrial life out there somewhere. And then, so after that interview, the Trump administration had told Barack Obama that what he had done was illegal and that he was not supposed to be talking about it. And then a few weeks after that, then Trump later comes out and talks about him having proof that there was extraterrestrial life. And that was around the same time that people really started to dive in and even boycott Trump, the administration, just really go full blown like, look, we want answers, we want justice, we deserve justice, the victims deserve justice. We are demanding that you guys take a fucking hold of what is going on in society right now, what is going on with the elite groups right now, and do something about it. It was when everything, all of the like attitudes were high, anxiety was bad, everybody was at their wits' end and like completely on edge with the Epstein files. And they were like, look, like, we want fucking answers. Release the rest of the fucking files. Pam Bondi can fucking kick rocks as far as I'm concerned. I think she's a fucking coward. That's just my opinion. I'm not going to agree with everything in the Trump administration. I did vote for him, but as of right now, I pretty much lost all respect. Not all, but I'm really struggling with it here. But all of this is a diversionary tactic to essentially keep our focus away from what's actually going on. And I think that this is what they were trying to keep our focus away from, was this topic right here. The clones, the virus, the genetically engineering humans, the designer babies. I think that this is what they wanted to keep our focus off of. And when we started to figure out what was actually going on and we started to realize what was actually happening, they had to throw something else. They had to throw us a bone. And so then, we bombed Iran. So everybody stopped talking about the files for a while because there was, conflict about Iran. Who thought that we should have bombed them and who thought that we shouldn't. And then, of course, after that and everything with Iran died down, then, of course, you have the extraterrestrial. They're going to release all of these statements, all of this proof, all of this evidence that there's, aliens among us and all of that shit. And it's all just a way to keep control of the narrative of what's being said about Jeffrey Epstein and what's being exposed about Jeffrey Epstein and his accomplices. And I think that it's important that we understand that no matter what's going on in society, no matter what's going on in life, this is the biggest deal. This is the make or break. And if we don't get a hold of it, we're incredibly screwed. And I mean that wholeheartedly. I wouldn't say something like that if I didn't truly believe it was real. That's just how I feel. And so I hope that with this, we all understand that we have to keep our head on the swivel, basically, and we have to stay alert because I believe something is going to happen. I think we are already, and for those of you who aren't Christians, that's fine. I completely respect that wholeheartedly. I think that we're already in the middle of the second coming. There's lots of evidence that shows, like, especially in the Bible, that the things that are happening around the world are proof that the end is near, and there's not going to be a correction. This is just the end of it. And that's just my opinion. I feel like something big is happening, and that's what I think it is. And so I just, with all of the evil and all of the disgusting, all of the nastiness that is just going around right now, I just I can't wait. Honestly, I'm so excited because it's so hard to be a mom, to be a girl, a woman, to be a victim of sexual assault. I have been sexually assaulted before. And it was like nothing near as bad as what these women and girls and children had gone through. Like, and it shook me to my core. And the worst part about it is I have to spend a lot of time, not with this person, but this person's still in my life and will always be in my life. And that's very hard for me. It's extremely hard for me. So I cannot imagine. And I kept mine private. I did not report him. I didn't tell anybody. I told one person, and the reaction I got from that person basically told me that I was on my own. I later then told a few people. My parents know. My husband knows. There's several people that know now. But at the time, I had told one person, and his reaction basically showed me that I was on my own. So I didn't disclose any of this. And so for me, I just can't imagine being these women who their identity and the crimes that were committed against them are public. Like, people are talking about it. And the thing that pisses me off is it's like there's so many people in society right now that are like, we need proof. We want to know that what you're saying is true. Okay, well, in most cases, and I've said this before, I said it in my previous episode, every victim should be believed unless you can discredit their story. But a lot of these women, there's pictures of them with these disgusting men. And the looks on their faces, it's not like they're enjoying life, living the fucking high life, flying on some private jet to a fucking island. They're terrified. And they're children. What more proof do you fucking need? Yeah, you have the people out there that are like, oh yeah, I'm an Epstein survivor. And they're like 18 and you're like, you live in Wisconsin and you've never been to New York. You've never been to, like, this is just hypothetical. I'm just like speaking out loud. Like, just somebody looking for that validation with absolutely no evidence behind it. If you are falsely accusing somebody of a sexual assault, I've said it before, your ass should be in fucking jail right next to him. If they actually did assault you, disclose it. That's how I feel. Report it. I wish I would have. I wish I fucking would have reported mine. I encourage everybody who feels like they were sexually assaulted to talk to somebody about it. That's just how I feel. But there are and that makes it hard for other victims, especially victims of the Epstein corruption bullshit, to come forward and be like, look, like, this was me. I am so sorry about that. I had some technical difficulties that I had to take care of really quickly, but what I was saying was it just makes it hard for victims to come forward and be able to disclose their abuse. And so I just want to encourage everybody to make sure that you are reporting your abusers, but also make sure that it's truthful. Make sure you're telling the truth. Make sure you're not doing it for attention and you're doing it because it's the right thing. But with that being said, my episode is done for today. And of course, at the end of my episode, that's when I was having the technical difficulties, so I couldn't finish my episode. But I appreciate you all so much for joining my episode today and being part of my amazing podcast journey. I'm so incredibly grateful for all of you guys. Like I said, I'm back up now and we are going to be rolling with it now. So I'm super excited about that, to be doing this again and to be back in my little mood, in my little podcast shell. So with that, you guys have a lovely day and don't forget to stay cautious and caffeinated.